वेलकम टू जेईई प्रेप हब। आज हम क्लास 11 एएचएसईसी इंग्लिश का यूनिट 7 द कैप्टिव बाय हरे कृष्णा डेका एक्चुअल पीडीएफ पेज बाय पेज पढ़ेंगे। जेईई प्रेप हब यहाँ सिर्फ चैनल नेम है। मैं पीडीएफ पेज को डायरेक्टली डिस्प्ले करूंगा, हर पैराग्राफ को एक्सप्लेन करूंगा और इंपॉर्टेंट वर्ड्स, थीम्स, टेक्स्ट बुक आंसर्स और प्रोबेबल एएचएसईसी क्वेश्चंस कवर करूंगा। द वॉइस इज हिंदलिश बट ऑल टीचिंग टेक्स्ट ऑन स्क्रीन इज इन इंग्लिश। आज का लेक्चर क्लासरूम वॉक थ्रू जैसा होगा। पेज देखिए, पैराग्राफ फॉलो कीजिए, फिर मीनिंग, कॉन्टेक्स्ट, कैरेक्टर और एग्जाम पॉइंट नोट कीजिए। द स्टोरी डील्स विद मिलिटेंसी, कैप्टिविटी, आइडेंटिटी, freedom, and human understanding. We will discuss the political conflict academically and respectfully without turning the lesson into sensational content. अब पीडीएफ पेज 1 देखिए। अबाउट द ऑथर सेक्शन में हरे कृष्णा डेका को लीडिंग असमीज शॉर्ट स्टोरी राइटर, पोएट एंड लिटरेरी क्रिटिक बताया गया है। ही इज अ प्रोलिफिक राइटर, यानी अ राइटर हु प्रोड्यूसेस अ लार्ज अमाउंट ऑफ वर्क। His literary presence in Assam is well recognized. He received the Sahitya Academy and Assam Valley Literary Awards. The story deals with the value of human understanding and with militancy, an issue that has affected contemporary life in Assam for several decades. Deka was also a successful police officer who occupied the highest seat in the profession. इसलिए he may have observed the issue from close quarters. His stories show strains of modernist writing and cover themes from cosmopolitanism to love and identity. एग्जाम पॉइंट, ऑथर के प्रोफेशन और अवार्ड्स को स्किप मत करिए। अब प्रो स्टार्ट होता है। द कैप्टिव हैज बीन बाइसाइक्लिंग सिंस आफ्टरनून. इट इज ऑलमोस्ट डस्क एंड ही इज एक्सट्रीमली टायर्ड. ही विशेस टू रेस्ट. The youth bicycling beside him understands his condition and gestures him to stop. This immediately shows that the youth is observant and attentive. जब वो बाइसाइकिल से उतरते हैं, कैप्टिव पिक्चरेस्क सराउंडिंग्स देखता है। प्लेस हाईलैंड्स के पास है। हिल से स्ट्रीम टम्बलिंग डाउन करती है, ह्यूज रॉक के साइड से फ्लो होती है और ब्रुक मर्मरिंग एंड गर्गलिंग साउंड प्रोड्यूस करती है। द क्वाइट नेचुरल सेटिंग कॉन्ट्रास्ट्स विद द हिडन डेंजर ऑफ कैप्टिविटी। यूथ रॉक की तरफ जेस्चर करता है। वाटर ब्राइट एंड क्लियर है एंड कैप्टिव को वो हिल से रशिंग यंग गर्ल की तरह दिखता है। This is a simile because the comparison is clearly imagined. His mind now searches for metaphors and similes whenever he sees something unfettered and unimpeded. Unfettered means not bound and unimpeded means without obstruction. Page 1 की main points: tired captive, dusk, bicycles, highlands, stream, rock, simile, metaphor, unfettered and unimpeded.
अब पीडीएफ पेज 2 देखिए। यूथ रॉक पर स्टैंड करके सराउंडिंग सर्वे करता है। देन ही पुट्स डाउन द शोल्डर बैग एंड सेज, "There is no danger here. You can rest for a while." वर्ड डेंजर कैप्टिव के माइंड में स्ट्रेंज इफेक्ट क्रिएट करता है बिकॉज अ वर्ड कैन कैरी डिफरेंट शेड्स ऑफ मीनिंग। कैप्टिव की आईज बैग पर जाती हैं। कंटेंट्स हिडन है बट ही गेसेस अ वेपन इज इनसाइड। नॉर्मली दिस ऑब्जेक्ट शुड क्रिएट फियर एंड बी द सिंबल ऑफ एवरीथिंग टू बी फियर्ड, बट यूथ के काम वर्ड्स उसका फियर एम्प्टी कर देते हैं। विदाउट रियलाइजिंग इट, यूथ्स फीलिंग स्प्रेड्स इनटू द कैप्टिव्स माइंड. Here is the paradox. Soldiers and security men are not near, but the bag itself contains danger. Still, the weapon gives a sense of security and reliance to both the youth and the captive. The gun is not only an instrument of control, it is becoming part of their relationship. Youth says he's feeling warm and asks whether the captive will take a dip. Captive also feels heat and oppressive humidity, but he does not want to bathe at that odd hour because cold or cough would create difficulty. Their halting places change frequently, so illness would be inconvenient. He refuses by shaking his head. Youth takes out a homespun towel, a gamosa from the bag, and plunges into the stream. Gamosa is culturally important in Assam. It is a homespun cotton towel used for wiping and connected with rituals and customs. The stream has moderate water, and youth bathes unconcernedly. Once again, captive's eyes move to the carelessly left bag. This detail is very important. A person carrying a dangerous weapon should not leave it carelessly, but youth does so because he has begun to trust the captive. Page 2 exam points. Object means the weapon inside the shoulder bag. Who took a dip means the youth. What is a gamosa means a homespun Assamese towel. What does unconcernedly mean? Means without worry. Also remember the contrast between the word danger and the feeling of security. The text is showing that the meaning of an object changes when a relationship changes.
अब पीडीएफ पेज 3 पर फोकस कीजिए। कैप्टिव को लगता है कि यूथ और उसके बीच सीक्रेटली सम अंडरस्टैंडिंग डेवलप हो गई है। वेपन इनसाइड द बैग इज द साइन ऑफ देयर रिलेशनशिप, बट दैट रिलेशनशिप हैज चेंज्ड फॉर द बेटर।
The carelessly thrown bag is a portent, yani a sign, not of danger but of trust. Captive calls himself a prisoner of faith. If he wanted, he could pick up the weapon and escape, but he knows he will not do so. इस सेंटेंस का मीनिंग है कि फिजिकल गार्ड के बिना भी ट्रस्ट उसे रोक रहा है. His captivity is changing from external force to internal acceptance. अब ट्री के शेड में ग्रासी पैच पर वो रेस्ट करता है. अ ब्यूटिफुल मल्टी कलर्ड बर्ड ब्रांच पर साइलेंटली बैठी है. कैप्टिव नेचर वर्ल्ड से वेरी familiar नहीं है. He thinks perhaps it is a kingfisher because it has a long beak and blue body. फ्रीज फ्री एज अ बर्ड उसके माइंड में आता है. बट इमीडिएटली ही क्वेश्चन सिंपल फ्रीडम. परहैप्स फिश स्ट्रीम में है, इसीलिए बर्ड यहां से नहीं जा सकती. इट इज बाउंड बाय एन इनविजिबल बॉन्ड. So the bird looks free, but its life is connected to the water and food. This becomes a metaphor for the captive and the youth. Youth water से splashing out आता है and kingfisher sound से frightened होकर take wing कर लेती है. Youth clothes पहनता है, wet gamosa ring करके बैग में रखता है and asks them to leave before dark. Both bicycles पर वापस चढ़ते हैं. Captive rides in front and youth follows. The text calls them the hostage and his keeper. But both now pedal with the same aim, a safe shelter from soldiers and security forces. Captive realizes it is as though he has arranged his own captivity. When soldiers approach, he feels the same anxiety as the youth. When soldiers move away or they reach safe shelter, he feels the same relief. This is the first clear sign that their emotional lives have become connected. Page 3 exam points. Prisoner of faith, carelessly thrown bag as trust, kingfisher and invisible bond, hostage and keeper, shared anxiety and shared relief.
अब PDF पेज 4 देखिए. नैरो पाथ थोड़ा ब्रॉडर हो जाता है, विच मीन्स डेस्टिनेशन क्लोज है. बुलक कार्ट ट्रैक्स विजिबल हैं. यूथ की बाइसाइकिल कैप्टिव के अलोंग साइड मूव करती है. यूथ का फेस काम एंड अनकंसर्न्ड है, एंड हिज अनइमोशनल स्टेट स्प्रेड्स टू द कैप्टिव्स माइंड. कैप्टिव वंस अगेन शोल्डर बैग को देखता है. लीथल वेपन अब हार्बिंजर ऑफ डेथ नहीं लगता. हार्बिंजर मीन्स अ साइन ऑफ व्हाट इज टू कम. वेपन रिलेशनशिप का साइन है, अथॉरिटी का सिंबल है. बट नरेटर आस्क्स वेदर इट इज ओनली दैट. He imagines himself as a prisoner at one end of the metallic gun barrel and the youth as a prisoner at the other end. Kingfisher phrase free as a bird फिर याद आता है. Captive hostage है, youth apparently free है, but youth cannot abandon him and go away. Until captive is free, youth also remains bound. The lifeless gun silently controls their relationship. This is one of the most important symbolic ideas in the chapter. Youth suddenly stops and two other youths emerge from beside a tree. Captive is startled because he had not noticed them. The youth gestures that there is no need for alarm, they belong to the organization. He asks them something in the tribal language, seems satisfied, and they all climb onto bicycles. All three bicycles pick up speed. It is almost dark when they reach the destination village. Beside the path is a bamboo platform where some youths are sitting. They carry stout wooden sticks but no lethal weapons in their hands. A kerosene lamp is placed at the corner. This gives us a realistic picture of village security. Important exam idea. The title The Captive begins to refer not only to the government officer but also to the youth who is bound by responsibility and ideology. Learn these phrases. Harbinger of death, prisoner at one end of the gun barrel, invisible bond and shared safety. अब PDF पेज 5 पर देखिए. बैम्बू प्लेटफॉर्म पर बैठे यूथ्स विलेज को गार्ड कर रहे हैं. यूथ उनसे ट्राइबल लैंग्वेज में बात करता है. वो नॉड से अग्रीमेंट कन्वे करते हैं. एंड एवरीवन पेडल्स फर्दर इनटू द विलेज. It is a remote tribal village. Thatch roofs, bare dry reed walls, and slits between the reeds show that the economic condition is far from sound. It is almost dark and villagers cattle herd कर रहे हैं. Strangers को देखकर few people curiosity show नहीं करते. Text suggests the youth's organization may often bring people to the village in this manner. Poverty का description carefully read कीजिए. Huts and paths पर extreme poverty visible है, but the people still have a healthy appearance. This contrast shows that material poverty and human vitality are not exactly the same. अब हेडमैन के घर का डिस्क्रिप्शन है. जिस हट के सामने दे स्टॉप वो एक्चुअली 2 हट्स हैं. 1 रूम हट मेन हट के बिसाइड है. Sloping thatched roof, attractively mud-plastered walls, clean compound, large storehouse, cultivated land, jackfruit, banana, areca nut trees, and beetle creepers are mentioned. Stout bamboo fence compound को encircle करता है and bamboo gate entrance को bar करता है. These details make the setting concrete and regional.
Youth says they will stay there tonight because it is the home of the village headman and quite safe. Two other youths push aside the gate and call the headman. Village elder घर पर नहीं है, so his son comes out and conducts them formally into the one-room house. Inside is an armless, rough-hewn chair and a low wooden cot. Page 5 के exam points: remote tribal village, poverty, cattle, bamboo platform, kerosene lamp, headman's house, cultivated land and formal hospitality. Setting question आए तो physical details plus social atmosphere दोनों लिखिए. Poverty is shown through huts, but villagers are not described as less human. They appear healthy and calm.
अब पीडीएफ पेज 6 देखिए। रूम में लो वुडन कॉट है, शीट कोर्स है बट क्लीन। डंग, प्लास्टर एंड फ्रेश अर्थ की माइल्ड अरोमा से पता चलता है कि हाउस रिसेंटली क्लीन हुआ है। हाउस होल्ड को उनकी अराइवल की न्यूज सेम डे मिली थी। डिसीजन हेस्ट में लिया गया बिकॉज सोल्जर्स दैट आफ्टरनून ओरिजिनल हाइडिंग प्लेस तक पहुंच सकते थे। यूजुअली ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नाइट में शिफ्ट करती है, बट दिस टाइम दे हैड टू फ्ली ऑन बाइसिकल्स इन ब्रॉड डे लाइट। हेडमैन सन कैप्टिव को बकेट ऑफ वाटर, ब्रास जग एंड क्लीन गमोसा देता है। बैम्बू स्क्रीन से एनक्लोज्ड वॉशिंग एरिया बनाया गया है। स्टोन स्लैब इसलिए रखा गया है सो दैट अर्थ स्पैटर ना हो। डार्क होने पर केरोसिन लैम्प स्क्रीन से हैंग किया गया। Captive realizes these arrangements were made for his benefit. For the family, he's a visitor, but he wonders whether they know that he's actually a prisoner. After washing hands and face, Captive refreshed feel करता है। Youth chair से उठता है as soon as Captive enters, and without words, Captive understands respect in that gesture. Captive chair पर नहीं, bed पर sit करता है and tells Youth to sit. Youth says he must be tired, asks him to rest, and explains that they may stay for a couple of days before moving to a safe camp in the hills. Dense jungles cross करनी होंगी, so it will be difficult. Then the youth takes out 2 tablets from his pocket and offers them. These are vitamin pills. Captive को pills की जरूरत शायद नहीं, but gesture के साथ warmth and fellow feeling आती है. Youth reply का wait नहीं करता. He goes to veranda. Silent communication between them has become possible. पेज 6 में फिजिकल हॉस्पिटैलिटी के साथ इमोशनल रिस्पेक्ट भी विजिबल है। एग्जाम आंसर: व्हाट अरेंजमेंट्स वर मेड फॉर द कैप्टिव? वाटर, जग, गमोसा, बैम्बू स्क्रीन वॉशिंग एरिया, स्टोन स्लैब एंड केरोसिन लैम्प। व्हाई वर दे मेड? द हाउसहोल्ड हैड रिसीव्ड न्यूज ऑफ हिज अराइवल एंड ट्रीटेड हिम एज अ विजिटर। अब पीडीएफ पेज 7 पर फोकस कीजिए। यूथ बैग शोल्डर पर कैरी करता है। वेपन इनसाइड इज एन इनर्ट ट्यूब, स्टिल अ साइन ऑफ their tense relationship. From the veranda, he says, I shall remain outside. Captive is now able to understand a subtle meaning behind the words. Youth has a duty, he will perform that duty, but he also trusts the captive. He expects cooperation, not a desperate escape attempt. Earlier, the words, don't try to escape, created fear and helplessness. Now the idea of remaining outside suggests trust and responsibility. This shows that the same sentence can change meaning when the relationship changes. A middle-aged man enters with a small girl carrying a platter of food. Captive smells cooked chicken. Headman brings a jug of water, places a mat, and arranges the meal formally. The girl places the platter on the mat. Headman uses humble gestures and invites the captive to eat. He carries a gamosa. He says there is little in the house to offer and asks the guest not to mind the simple food. He calls it his good fortune that a great leader is staying in his house. This tells us that the youth has probably explained the captive's identity in a respectful way, perhaps without telling the household that he is a prisoner. Headman asks him to leave the platter outside after eating and turns up the lamp before leaving. Hospitality is important here because it complicates our first idea of a violent captivity. There is still political violence in the background, but the local household treats the man with dignity. Exam question: what is the food offered? Answer: parboiled rice with chicken curry. What did the headman bring? A jug of water, a mat, and a gamosa. What does the headman's respectful language show? It shows that the captive is presented to the household as a respected leader or visitor. Page 7 theme: duty remains, but fear is gradually replaced by trust and human courtesy. अब पीडीएफ पेज 8 देखिए। कैप्टिव एक्सट्रीमली हंग्री है एंड ऑल्दो राइस पारबॉइल्ड है, चिकन करी के साथ टेस्टी लगता है। मील के बाद वो प्लेटर पर हैंड्स एंड फेस वॉश करता है, प्लेटर वरांडा में रखकर रूम में रिटर्न करता है। मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट डिटेल, आउटसाइड कोई गार्ड्स नहीं है एंड डोर को आउटसाइड से लॉक करने का वे भी नहीं है।
फिजिकल एस्केप अपॉर्चुनिटी कंप्लीटली अवेलेबल है, बट कैप्टिव वॉलेंटरीली रूम में रिटर्न करता है और डोर क्लोज करता है। इस पॉइंट से एक्सटर्नल कैप्टिविटी ग्रेजुअली इंटरनल कैप्टिविटी में ट्रांसफॉर्म होती है। कैप्टिव बेड पर सैचल से नोटबुक निकालता है। फॉर रफली 3 months ही हैज बीन कीपिंग अ जर्नल ऑफ हिज कैप्टिविटी। टोटल कैप्टिविटी 7 months की है, सो लास्ट 3 months का डेली एक्सपीरियंस रिटन है। अर्लियर पीरियड को मेमोरी से रिकॉर्ड किया गया है। जर्नल सिर्फ इवेंट्स का रिकॉर्ड नहीं, इट इज अ मिरर ऑफ मेंटल चेंज। डोर क्लोज करते ही सेंस ऑफ कैप्टिविटी एनगल्फ करता है। ओपन डोर के टाइम वॉइसेस फ्रॉम मेन हाउस से कनेक्शन फील होता था। क्लोज डोर के बाद लिंक सेवर्ड, रूम लोनली एंड साइलेंट। येट ही फील्स एट पीस आफ्टर इम्प्रिजनिंग हिमसेल्फ। यूथ ने उससे आउटसाइड गार्ड नहीं किया, सो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी कैप्टिव पर आ गई। ही इमेजिन्स द ओपन स्काई एंड फ्रीडम आउटसाइड। His mind may tempt his feet to go out, but his feet refuse to break the unseen trust. Finally, he accepts the discipline of the youth's words and feels peaceful. Self-imposed captivity phrase याद रखिए. It means a condition where the prisoner is no longer kept only through locks or force. Trust, conscience, and relationship also hold him. Exam question: how did captive record his movement? Answer: he kept a journal in a notebook, directly recording the last 3 months and reconstructing earlier events from memory. Question: why did he close the door himself? Answer: because he accepted the bond and responsibility created by the youth's trust. This page is a major psychological turning point.
अब PDF पेज 9 पर प्रीवियस डायरी एंट्रीज को समझते हैं। फर्स्ट डे ऑफ कैप्टिविटी पर कैप्टिव को हाउस के अंदर पुश करके डोर आउटसाइड से लॉक किया गया था। वर्ड्स थे, वी शैल बी आउटसाइड, डोंट ट्राई टू एस्केप। उस दिन ये वर्ड्स हार्श एंड फियरफुल थे। 4 गन वील्डिंग यूथ्स ने उसे उसकी ओन कार से ड्रैग किया और अनदर व्हीकल के बैक सीट में फोर्सफुली पुश किया। व्हीकल ग्रेट स्पीड से मूव अवे हुआ। It was a terrifying moment because he felt danger to his very existence. Later, he understood that the logic of the youth's world was different from the logic of his own ordered existence. He could not understand their tribal language, so gestures remained mysterious. But even those gestures created fear. The youths also used bookish English and Assamese words. Important words are nation, state, revolution, imperialistic power, national consciousness, government, public, freedom, and rights. In their world, these words had meanings different from his world. Security भी differently understood थी because their interpretation of law was different. Captive thought he was a citizen of a free country. They called him the lackey of imperialistic power. Laws that he saw as a haven of security, they saw as tools of state terrorism. His kidnapping was terrorism in his eyes, but they viewed it as duty to their nation. यहाँ ऑथर सिंपल गुड वर्सेस बैड आंसर नहीं दे रहे. He is showing competing perspectives and the psychological difficulty of translation across worlds. Exam answer: why could the captive not trust the youths? Because he could not understand their language, their ideology, or whether their guns might fire at any moment. What did the words nation and freedom show? They showed that shared vocabulary does not always mean shared political experience. Page 9 का core theme is conflict of meanings. The same word security can suggest protection to one group and repression to another. अब PDF पेज 10 देखिए। The youths see the government as an illegitimate government, something like a sandbar across the mouth of a river that revolution will sweep away. Captive has read about revolutions, but when guns are pointed at his body, he feels as though revolution is being aimed at him. They reassure him that he personally is insignificant. He has been taken hostage because he symbolizes the repressive security arrangements of the government machinery. In their logic, government uses security as a mask for repression. They have demands. They believe the government will grant them because if the captive dies, the mask of security will be ripped apart and the government will lose respect. Important narration note: these are ideas the captive reconstructs from their language. The story asks us to understand their reasoning, not automatically approve it. Then comes the electromagnetic field metaphor. Captive imagines that each world has a linguistic center. His world has one positive charge and the youth's world has another positive charge. When 2 positive charges approach, they repel each other. This means the same political words are surrounded by different histories and experiences. Even though both sides may use words like nation, law, rights, and freedom, their meanings are not identical.
The captive, an important government officer with a bureaucratic attitude, slowly understands that both worlds are influenced by economic realities mixed with politics. Exam question: how do the youths view the government? Answer: they view it as an illegitimate imperialistic power and as a repressive machinery. Question: explain the electromagnetic metaphor. Answer: it represents two different linguistic and ideological worlds whose positive assumptions repel each other, making communication difficult. Use balanced language in exams. Do not write that the author declares one side completely right. Write that the story presents conflicting perceptions and allows the captive to understand a different world.
अब PDF पेज 11 पर कैप्टिव की फियर और मेंटल टेंशन को एक्सप्लेन करते हैं. He feels afraid because he can see no escape from the gulf between his world and the youth's world. Their words and reasoning remain hidden like a riddle. They do not physically torture him, and they are not exactly disrespectful. Sometimes they allow him to exchange letters with home. But their way of thinking repeatedly clashes with his own, so he cannot trust them. He feels that at any moment the gun muzzles could discharge bullets into his breast. Physical fear के above, mental tension even greater है. Every day shelters change. There is no settled place. Nightly they wander through fields, wade through chest-high rivers, and march through dense jungles and marshes. He says he could have shrugged off these physical hardships if he had been able to trust them. They push him into rooms and stand guard outside. Occasionally they say, "We shall remain outside. Don't try to escape." These words seem weighted with ridicule, callousness, and cruelty. They express not only his helplessness, but also the helplessness of national power. Each word becomes synonymous with terror. He cannot understand how a functionary like himself becomes a symbol of government machinery. The youths believe capturing him strikes a devastating blow and sounds the bugle of revolution. Captive thinks they are guided by a grave error, and perhaps they do not understand the result of that error. He is uncertain whether his own ideas are logical or erroneous, but mistrust grows. His guards change almost every week, and there is no stable conversation. Just as they see him as a symbol of government, he sees each guard as a small symbol of terrorism. Page 11 shows how captivity is not only physical. Uncertainty, silence, changing guards, and political misunderstanding produce mental imprisonment. Exam question: what was greater than physical fear? The tremendous mental tension. Question: what hardships did he face? Changing shelters, wandering through fields, wading through rivers, and marching through jungles and marshes. अब PDF पेज 12 पर मेजर टर्निंग पॉइंट है. कैप्टिव के गार्ड्स ऑलमोस्ट एवरी वीक चेंज होते थे. बाय द टाइम ही गॉट टू नो वन ग्रुप, दे वर रिप्लेस्ड. कॉन्वर्सेशंस नहीं होती थी, एक्सेप्ट व्हेन ओकेजनल लीडर्स केम. Guards के unemotional faces say he could not fathom their thoughts and could not trust them. He thought of each guard as a diminutive symbol of terrorism, just as they thought of him as the government symbol. But 4 months ago, everything changed when this particular youth took charge. Text positive and negative magnetic charges का metaphor use करता है. Both had positive ideological fields, but small negative charges allowed their minds to meet. Youth ordinary guard नहीं था. He took independent decisions, did not always wait for orders, pronounced English in an educated way, and spoke Assamese fluently even though he was tribal. They talked about everyday matters and sometimes ideals. Youth had deep faith in revolution but listened attentively. There was no callousness or disregard in his words. On the first day, he changed the nature of captivity. Earlier doors were locked from outside and guns were trained on the captive. New youth came without a gun and without other guards. He asked about the captive's well-being and gave news of his family. While leaving, he said, "Latch the door from inside. I shall be outside. Don't be afraid." These words have a strange effect. Emptiness and discord vanish. The meaning of "I shall be outside" changes because it is followed by "don't be afraid." Compare the two sentences. Don't try to escape is an order based on fear. Don't be afraid is reassurance based on trust. Same room, same hostage situation, but completely different mental experience. This is a key HSEC question. Model answer: the new youth changes captivity by replacing external force and suspicion with respect, reassurance, and cooperation. His educated speech, independent decisions, and concern for family show his human side.
पेज 12 का सेंट्रल फ्रेज एग्जैक्ट कोट के साथ लर्न करिए. लैच द डोर फ्रॉम इनसाइड. आई शैल बी आउटसाइड. डोंट बी अफ्रेड.
अब PDF पेज 13 देखिए. एक्सटर्नल सर्कमस्टांसेस रिमेन हार्श. कैप्टिव को फ्रीक्वेंटली शिफ्ट किया जाता है, विलेज टू विलेज एट नाइट, मॉस्किटोज एंड बग्स के बीच. ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एक्सट्रीम अलर्टनेस में रहती है, बट मेंटल चेंज हो चुका है. ही इज स्टिल अ हॉस्टेज एंड यूथ इज स्टिल कीपर, yet their relationship has changed into companionship. Youth still carries a gun in his bag, but gun's meaning changes from terror to trust. This symbolic change is central to the chapter. During journeys through hills and vales, sometimes captive becomes teacher and youth disciple. When youth mentions famous writers, captive's reading helps him talk about their works, and youth listens like an attentive student. But nature, rural life, agriculture and farming के topics में youth becomes teacher and captive student. Captive realizes he has no clear idea of the relationship between human beings and nature. Strange way में captivity उसकी knowledge augment करती है compared to his previous free life. This is a major irony. Life in captivity gives him learning that he did not access in freedom. Then, after reaching a village, captive falls seriously ill. High fever makes him pass out several times. Even in semi-conscious condition, he understands that youth has secretly gone to fetch a doctor from a distant city. When he becomes conscious, youth is sitting beside the bed with great anxiety on his face. This is evidence of genuine care. A purely formal guard might protect a hostage, but fetching a doctor from far away and sitting beside him shows personal concern. Exam question. What was the nature of their relationship? It changed from hostage and keeper to companionship, built through respect, mutual learning and care. Question. Who was teacher and who was disciple? It changed according to subject. Captive taught literature, youth taught nature and rural life. Question. How did the youth help during illness? He fetched a doctor from a distant city and stayed beside the captive. Page 13 theme. Physical captivity continues, but intellectual and emotional captivity becomes a bond of learning.
अब PDF पेज 14 पर यूथ की केयर और जर्नल का रोल देखिए. Head of the household tells the captive that the youth did not move from his side until he recovered. Youth gave medicines, heated water, used cold compresses on the forehead, and even cleaned the captive's excrement. This is astonishingly caring behavior. Youth does not express emotion after recovery. He simply says the family was not informed about the illness because they would have worried. Captive mumbles his gratitude. This paragraph makes the young man complex. He belongs to a militant organization, carries a gun, and controls a hostage, but he's also capable of intimate care. The story asks us to see a person beyond a political label, without denying the political conflict. After fever subsides, they stay in the village while captive regains strength. They discuss many topics. Captive wishes to keep a journal and expects the youth may refuse. But youth agrees readily and brings a notebook the next day. Captive writes entries and shows them to the youth. Youth reads them and sometimes nods as though he has glimpsed the captive's soul. After illness, captive has a greater unconscious sense of uncertainty. The youth reads aloud and points out that the subconscious uncertainty is visible in the journal. This shows that the journal is not only a record of movement, it is a record of psychological change. Later, the youth says, "You are impatient to be free, aren't you? But your government is not concerned. We have sent terms and conditions. We can release you when those conditions are met." Captive asks what happens if the government does not agree. Youth is at a loss for words, then smiles and says, "In that case, you will have to become one of us. Would you mind?" The line sounds almost friendly, but it is also disturbing because release depends on political acceptance. Exam point. How did the youth treat the captive? With medicine, doctor, respect, conversation, and permission to keep a journal, although the captivity remained. What did the journal reveal? The captive's subconscious uncertainty about freedom. अब PDF पेज 15 देखिए. In the end, captive stops thinking about freedom and accepts captivity as the normal condition of his life. Around this time, youth relaxes vigilance. After saying, "I shall be outside," he may go somewhere else instead of standing guard. He carries the gun unobtrusively and sometimes leaves the bag near captive. Outwardly, these are opportunities to escape, but invisible bond binds captive to youth. This is a central psychological paradox. Doors and guards become less restrictive, but trust becomes stronger. Physical captivity weakens while emotional connection strengthens. Then news arrives that soldiers and police are searching the area. Captive should normally feel happy because authorities may rescue him. But he becomes anxious when soldiers approach. His mind clamors to go with youth to a place of safety. His conscious mind knows people in his old world would call this illogical. Yet he thinks safety means distance from those soldiers. Safety means the gun in the youth's hands. This is the clearest reversal of perspective in the story. The official system calls soldiers protectors, but the captive's lived experience now makes their approach frightening. Even today, when soldiers approach, they flee to the village. After being settled in the room, youth goes elsewhere to sleep. Captive latches the door and accepts captivity willingly. He writes the day's events, swallows the 2 tablets with a draught of water, and lies on the rough bed. The bed seems to embrace him with safety. At dawn, he hears bird song, unlatches the door, and goes to the veranda. The household head seems to be waiting for him. Page 15, exam point. What does safety mean to the captive now? It means distance from soldiers and security in the youth's presence. Why is captivity self-imposed? Because he has opportunities to escape but chooses not to due to trust and companionship.
अब PDF पेज 16 पर मॉर्निंग सीन और डिफिकल्ट एथिकल क्वेश्चन है. हेडमैन्स फैमिली रिस्पेक्टफुली डिस्टेंस मेंटेन करती है फ्रॉम द लीडर. लिटिल गर्ल ब्लैक टी एंड मोलासेस लाती है. मिल्क नहीं है बट कैप्टिव बोल से टी एंजॉय करता है. दिस डिटेल शोज रूरल हॉस्पिटैलिटी एंड द फैमिलीज रिस्पेक्टफुल ट्रीटमेंट. 2 youths who brought them the previous evening arrive on bicycles. They say the place is no longer safe because they met soldiers a few kilometers away. Soldiers had stopped and searched them and asked whether strangers had come this way. They sent soldiers toward a distant village. Youth decides they must move camp because villages are not safe anymore. Captive has been wanting to ask a question, but hesitation prevented him. He suddenly asks what youth will do if soldiers surround the house and try to rescue him. Youth seems unprepared and returns the question. Tell me, what will you do? Captive does not know how to reply. Youth then says, if those circumstances arise, I shall have no choice but to execute you. Captive is dazed because the same youth who nursed him through severe illness is now speaking calmly about execution. Youth says, you are not our enemy, but don't have any illusions. Government seeks legitimacy by protecting citizens. Their revolution must prove government cannot ensure safety. Therefore, the captive's death would serve their political argument. We must explain this carefully. The story calls it strange logic and shows the captive's moral disturbance. Understanding a character's reasoning is not the same as approving it. Exam question. What would the youth do if soldiers surrounded the house? He says he would have no choice but to execute the captive. Question. Why is the captive shocked? Because the caring youth speaks unconcernedly about killing him. This page presents the conflict between personal compassion and political duty.
अब PDF पेज 17 देखिए. Youth explains that if soldiers surround them, the government will be the cause of the captive's death. If revolution succeeds, it will be the youth's duty to kill him. Captive knows no law in any country would accept this logic as just. Yet he feels the youth has no other alternative within his ideological world. The thought of execution first causes an upheaval in his mind, but then he becomes calm. He seems to leave his own sphere of logic and step into the youth's world. Words like revolution, legality, and justice acquire different meanings there. This is a crucial interpretive paragraph. The captive is trying to understand the youth's framework, not necessarily agreeing with it. They decide to begin the journey to camp that evening. Village boys are sent to check route safety. During afternoon meal, one boy brings devastating news. Soldiers have searched out and destroyed the camp that morning. They cannot go there and must spend another night in this hamlet, even though it is no longer safe. The youth strengthens security arrangements. New faces appear, weapons are hidden in bags, instructions are given, and paths into the village are guarded. Headman and family are sent to another house. Youth tells captive that he must spend the night in the captive's room. Several freedom fighters will guard the house. The captive understands the irony immediately. These freedom fighters have come to secure his captivity. This phrase is important for the title and theme. One group's claim to freedom can appear as another person's imprisonment. Exam question. What is the irony in freedom fighters?
They fight for their idea of freedom, yet in this scene they guard a captive and preserve his bondage. Another question, why could the group not go to the camp? Soldiers had searched and destroyed it. Page 17 builds the tension before the night siege.
अब पीडीएफ पेज 18 पर नाइट सीज का क्लाइमैक्स है। इवनिंग मील डार्कनेस से पहले हो जाता है। डार्कनेस सराउंडिंग्स को एनगल्फ कर लेती है। डिम लैम्पलाइट में यूथ रूम के डोर के पास एक्सट्रीमली अलर्ट खड़ा है। टुडे ही कैरीज द लीथल वेपन ओपनली इन हिज हैंड। कैप्टिव बेड पर मोशनलेस बैठा है। Youth tells him to sleep and says he will remain awake. But captive wonders whether sleep can come on such a night. Perhaps he dozes. Suddenly an outside guard door bang करके enters. Youth को information देता है and leaves. Youth says the enemy has surrounded us on all sides. Their eyes meet and Youth gestures captive to leave the bed and come forward. Outside gunfire की sounds आती हैं. These are not crackers. Captive gets down and stands before the youth. Youth trains the gun at his breast. Captive realizes the final moment of captivity has arrived. He wonders, could the final moment be as long as this? Then several guns fire together. He thinks, so this is what death is like. But why is he still conscious? Everything happens at once. Bullets hit the youth. Blood comes from his mouth. His body is riddled with bullets. The gun slides from his hand and he falls like a felled tree. Then the key sentence. The final moment of his captivity had not turned into the moment of death, for the youth had not fired his gun. He had lowered it instead. This means the youth chooses not to kill the captive even at the final instant. The soldier's bullet skim the youth, but the youth's own gun does not kill the captive. This is the moral climax. Exam question. What did the youth do when the captive stood before him? He aimed the gun at his breast, but lowered it instead of firing. Question. Why is this action important? It shows that personal human understanding defeats the command of political duty for one final moment. अब पीडीएफ पेज 19 पर रेस्क्यू और फाइनल इमोशनल शॉक है। Countless bullets hit the youth's body. Several soldiers rush into the room. One soldier extends his hands toward the captive and says, "Captain Batra, thank God you are safe." This line reveals the captive's identity. He is Captain Batra, a government officer, not an unnamed civilian. Captain Batra has an RT set in his hands. RT set means radio talkie. He speaks into it. Operation successful, target safe, one terrorist killed. The word terrorist crashes against the magnetic center in his skull. It explodes loudly in his mind. He says only two words, "Ah, no." Why is this reaction important? Because Captain Batra has experienced the youth as a human being, caregiver, teacher, companion, and protector. The official operation reduces him to one political label, terrorist. Captain Batra sits beside the youth's lifeless body and touches his cold forehead. He remains staring at the open, lifeless eyes. Captain Batra does not stop him. Instead, standing beside the dead body, he formally pays his respects by touching his cap. This ending is moving because political categories and personal understanding collide. The story does not say the kidnapping or violence is harmless. It shows that human relationships cannot be fully understood through labels. Exam question. Who was Captain Batra? The captive. What did he say on the RT set? Operation successful, target safe, one terrorist killed. How did he offer respect? By touching his cap. Why did he say, "Ah, no"? Because he was emotionally connected to the youth and could not accept the reduction of the young man to a single political label. The translation credit is given to Mitra Phukan. Page 19 completes the plot and leads into the glossary. अब पीडीएफ पेजेस 19 एंड 20 के डिफिकल्ट वर्ड्स को कॉन्टेक्स्ट के साथ रिवाइज करते हैं। Gestured means indicated through body language, often by hand movement. Picturesque means worthy of a picture, visually attractive. Highlands means elevated or hilly land. Gurgled means flowed while making a bubbling sound. Chuckling means a soft, quiet laugh. Simile means a comparison using like or as. Metaphor means an implied comparison.
Unfettered means free and not bound by chains. Unimpeded means free from obstruction. Lurked means to be within or hidden. Endangered means threatened. Gamosa is a homespun cotton towel used for wiping the body and hands. It has cultural importance in Assamese identity, rituals, and customs. Unconcernedly means without concern or worry. Potent means a sign or indication. Lethal means dangerous or capable of causing death. Harbinger means a sign of what is to come. Shackled means tied or bound. Satchel means a bag. Erroneous means not correct. Echelons means levels or ranks in an organization. Draught means the act of drinking. Arty set means radio talkie. अब context revise कीजिए. Stream gurgled. Surroundings were picturesque. Youth gestured and water was unfettered and unimpeded. Weapon was lethal and became a potent or harbinger of different meanings. Captive felt mentally shackled even when door was open. He wrote in a satchel-carried notebook and drank a draught of water with tablets. The youths operated through different organizational echelons, while the captive often wondered whether his own ideas were erroneous. Vocabulary answers में exact meanings write कीजिए. Simile और metaphor को confuse मत करिए. Simile normally uses like or as. Metaphor is an implied comparison. Gamosa को simply towel लिखने से meaning incomplete हो सकता है. Mention its Assamese cultural significance if question allows. Arty set को radio talkie लिखिए. This glossary connects language to the chapter's themes of culture, freedom, danger, and relationship.
अब PDF पेज 20 and 21 पर ऑफिशियल समरी को पैराग्राफ बाय पैराग्राफ समझते हैं. Summary says this is the story of a man taken hostage and what happens during the journey of captivity. Story begins with captive and abductor traveling by bicycles across unfamiliar terrain. Captive has traveled since the day he was taken hostage and has become familiar with the young man who takes him to different sites. Authorities search for him, so abductors change locations and habitats regularly. Captive keeps a journal of his experience. Young man keeps his gun in a bag. Gun is not simply a sign of power, it is also symbolic of the connection between them. Across different terrains, Captive realizes this is a completely different world from his own. Change in circumstance produces a change in response. He gets first-hand experience of constant hardship and unseen difficulty. He also understands that identity and freedom are part of the abductor's aspirations. What authorities see as freedom is perceived as bondage by others. Although circumstances are dark and foreboding, an invisible bond holds Captive and abductor. Their relationship evolves gradually, and Captive understands things from a perspective he did not access earlier. Authorities and security forces finally locate them. In a swift movement, they gun down the abductor and rescue the captive unharmed. Seeing the death of a young man whose company he has shared becomes an eye-opener for the captive. The story deals with basic human values that cannot always be evaluated by politics and power. The bond shows that all things cannot be measured in black and white terms. Relationships cannot all be defined through political structures. The Captive is a moving story showing the essence of human understanding. Exam points from summary: gun as symbol, journal as record of experience, freedom versus bondage, invisible bond, gradual relationship, rescue, death as eye-opener, human values beyond politics. The title is broader than the physical captive. It also includes the young man and the bonds that restrict both. Summary answer writing के लिए use करें sequence: hostage, journey, changing perception, invisible bond, rescue, human understanding. अब टेक्स्ट बुक कॉम्प्रिहेंशन सेक्शंस 1 and 2 करते हैं. Section 1 asks for 1 or 2 words. Question 1. Where is the place described at the beginning of the story? Answer: near the highlands. Question 2. Who took a dip in the water? Answer: the youth. Question 3. What were they traveling by? Answer: bicycles. Question 4. In whose house was the captive kept? Answer: the village headman's house. Question 5. Which bird does the captive think of? Answer: kingfisher. Section 2 asks for a few words. Question 1. What is referred to as the object by the captive? Answer: the weapon inside the youth's shoulder bag. Question 2. What food was offered in the headman's house? Answer: parboiled rice with chicken curry. Question 3. How did Captain Batra offer his respects to the boy? Answer: by touching his cap with his hand. Question 4. What did the boy say he would do if circumstances changed? Answer: he would have to execute the captive. Question 5. How did the captive know that the boy was highly educated? Answer:
from his pronunciation of English words, fluent Assamese, and independent thinking. आंसर राइटिंग टिप। सेक्शन 1 में एग्जैक्ट 1 और 2 वर्ड्स, सेक्शन 2 में क्वेश्चन को डायरेक्टली आंसर करके और फ्यू वर्ड्स या 1 सेंटेंस यूज करिए। हेडमैन्स फूड आंसर में पार बॉइल्ड राइस एंड चिकन करी दोनों लिखिए। बर्ड आंसर में किंगफिशर लिखिए। ऑब्जेक्ट आंसर में वेपन इनसाइड द शोल्डर बैग लिखना सेफेस्ट है। कैप्टन बत्रा का जेस्चर टचिंग हिज कैप है। बॉय का प्रपोज्ड एक्शन एग्जीक्यूशन है। एजुकेशन एविडेंस प्रोनाउंसिएशन ऑफ इंग्लिश एंड फ्लुएंट असमीज है।
अब सेक्शंस 3 एंड 4 के मॉडल आंसर्स करते हैं। क्वेश्चन 1, व्हाट इज द नेचर ऑफ द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द कैप्टिव एंड द यंग मैन? आंसर, it begins as a relationship between hostage and keeper based on force and a gun. Gradually, respect, conversation, mutual learning, medical care, trust, and shared hardship transform it into companionship. The gun changes from a sign of terror into a sign of trust, although the political danger remains. Question 2. How does the captive come to understand the meaning of freedom fighters? Answer. When the youth says several freedom fighters will guard the house, the captive understands the irony that people fighting for their freedom have come to secure his captivity. Question 3. How did the captive record his movement in captivity? Answer. He kept a journal in a notebook. He directly recorded the last 3 months and reconstructed earlier experiences from memory. The journal also revealed subconscious uncertainty. Question 4. How did his abductors treat the captive? Answer. Initially, they used force, locked doors, guards, and guns, although they did not physically torture him and sometimes allowed letters home. Later, the new youth treated him with respect, food, water, medicine, conversation, trust, and companionship, while the captive remained under custody. Question 5. Why does the captive feel his abductor is also not free? Answer. The youth is bound by responsibility to the captive, the organization, the ideology, and the gun-based relationship. He cannot abandon the captive and go away. Until the captive is free, the youth remains a captive too. Section 4. Question 1. Comment on the significance of the title. Answer. The title refers directly to the government officer held hostage, but also to the young abductor. The captive is physically confined, while the youth is bound by duty, ideology, organization, and responsibility. The captive too becomes psychologically tied to the youth through trust and companionship. The gun symbolically connects both men at opposite ends of the barrel. Therefore, the title refers to the abductee, the abductor, and the invisible political and emotional bonds. Section 4. Question 2. Write about the journey. Answer. They travel by bicycle through highlands, stop at a stream, move through villages, stay at the headman's house, shift to avoid soldiers, and develop trust through conversation and care. The group faces a siege. The youth lowers his gun instead of shooting the captive, but security forces kill the youth and rescue Captain Batra. The physical journey becomes a journey of psychological understanding. Probable AHSE question. Give a character sketch of the young man. मॉडल आंसर को स्ट्रक्चर के साथ समझिए। The young man is politically committed, alert, independent, educated, respectful, and deeply human. He belongs to a revolutionary organization and carries a gun, but he does not behave like an ordinary guard. He listens to the captive, speaks Assamese fluently, discusses ideals, respects his privacy, brings medicine, fetches a doctor, cares for him during illness, and allows him to keep a journal. His words, "Don't be afraid," change the nature of captivity. At the same time, he remains bound by revolutionary duty, as shown when he says that he may have to execute the captive if soldiers surround them. At the final moment, he lowers his gun instead of firing. This shows the conflict between political duty and human understanding. Answer writing formula. First, introduce his political position. Then give 3 or 4 actions as evidence. Then explain his inner conflict and conclude with the final lowering of the gun. Do not write only that he is good or bad. The story presents him as complex. He is capable of violence within an organization, but also capable of care, respect, learning, and sacrifice. Question. Why is the youth not an ordinary guard? Answer. He takes independent decisions, speaks educated English, speaks Assamese fluently, discusses ideals, and acts with personal judgment. Question. Which action best proves his human side? Answer. He fetches a doctor from a distant city and cares for the captive throughout illness. Question. Which final action changes the moral meaning of the story? Answer. He lowers his gun rather than shooting the captive.
Use these points in a long answer.
Probable question. Give a character sketch of Captain Batra or explain the captive's psychological transformation. Model answer. Captain Batra begins as a government officer held hostage. Initially, he is frightened, mistrustful, and unable to understand the abductor's language and political reasoning. He sees himself as a victim of terrorism and feels mental tension greater than physical hardship. Over time, his experience with the young man changes him. He learns about rural life, agriculture, nature, and the youth's ideals. He discovers that the youth can be a teacher, disciple, caregiver, and companion. He voluntarily stays when escape is possible and begins to feel safer with the youth than with approaching soldiers. His journal records this psychological change and reveals uncertainty about freedom. At the end, Captain Batra is rescued, but he cries, "Ah, no," when the youth is called a terrorist. He sits beside the dead body and touches the forehead. This shows that his official identity remains that of an officer, but he has gained the capacity to see the humanity of a former captor. Answer writing tip. Contrast the first phase and later phase. First, fear and mistrust. Later, trust and companionship. Final, grief and respect. Use terms such as hostage, journal, invisible bond, safety, human understanding, and political label. Do not call him weak because he changes. The change represents deeper understanding. Question. How does Batra react to the word terrorist? The label clashes with his lived relationship and produces the cry, "Ah, no." Question. What does his salute signify? It is formal respect for the dead youth's human dignity. Probable AHSEC question. Explain the gun as a symbol in The Captive. Model answer. At first, the gun is a sign of force, danger, and terror. It marks the youth's authority over the captive. As trust develops, the same gun becomes a sign of their relationship and a source of security for both. The captive says he is a prisoner at one end of the metallic gun barrel, while the youth is a prisoner at the other end. The gun therefore connects and controls both men. It is a lifeless object, but it silently regulates their behavior. When the youth leaves the bag carelessly, the captive understands that trust has developed. When the gun is left near him and he does not escape, the object becomes a test of faith. At the climax, the youth trains the gun at the captive but lowers it instead of firing. This final action shows that personal human understanding has momentarily overcome political duty. Important contrast for the answer: same gun, changing meaning. First terror, later authority and trust, finally a moral choice. Question. Why does the captive call himself a prisoner of faith? Because he could take the weapon and escape, but he chooses not to break the youth's trust. Question. What does the gun barrel image show? It shows that both men are bound by the same relationship, one at each end of the weapon. Avoid writing that the gun is only a weapon. In this story, it is also a symbol of power, connection, trust, fear, responsibility, and moral choice.
Probable question. Explain freedom and captivity in the story. Model answer. The story presents freedom as a contested idea. Authorities regard the captive's rescue as freedom, while the abductors describe their own movement as a struggle for freedom. The captive discovers that physical freedom is not enough. Even when doors are open and the weapon is left near him, he does not escape because trust and companionship bind him. The young man also appears free, but he is bound by the captive, the organization, and its ideology. He cannot abandon the hostage and go away. The phrase freedom fighters becomes ironic because those who fight for their idea of freedom arrive to secure another person's captivity. The captive's mind also changes. At first he wants escape, but later soldiers approaching to rescue him make him anxious. Safety comes to mean distance from soldiers and the youth's protection. Therefore, freedom and bondage cannot be defined in simple black and white terms. They may be physical, psychological, political, or emotional. In your answer, use 4 words: physical captivity, psychological bond, political freedom, and invisible relationship. Question. Why does the captive stop thinking of freedom? Because trust in the youth and acceptance of their companionship create an invisible bond stronger than the opportunity to escape. Question. Why is the title broader than the abductee? Because the youth is also bound by duty and ideology, and the captive is psychologically tied to the youth. बैलेंस्ड आंसर में वायलेंस को इग्नोर मत कीजिए, बट ह्यूमन अंडरस्टैंडिंग को सेंट्रल थीम के रूप में एक्सप्लेन कीजिए.
Probable question.
Explain the transformation of the relationship between the captive and the young man. Model answer. At first, the relationship is based on abduction, fear, locked doors, guards, and guns. The captive mistrusts changing guards and understands their words as threats. The relationship begins to change when the new youth takes charge and says, "Don't be afraid." He gives news of the family, respects the captive's privacy, listens to his opinions, and does not speak with callousness. The captive and youth discuss literature, nature, rural life, and agriculture. They become teacher and student to each other. The youth fetches a doctor, gives medicines, heats water, and cares for the captive during illness. The youth also agrees to the journal. Gradually, vigilance relaxes, and the gun changes from a sign of terror into a sign of trust. The captive has chances to escape but chooses not to break the invisible bond. Yet the political structure remains, as shown by the possibility of execution and the final siege. At the last moment, the youth lowers the gun instead of firing. This action reveals the deepest conflict between political duty and human understanding. Answer structure: first phase, turning point, evidence of companionship, remaining tension, final moral action. Use exact quotation, "Don't be afraid," and exact phrase, "sign of trust." Question: what is the turning point? The arrival of the new youth and his reassurance that the captive should not be afraid. Question: how does illness change the relationship? The youth's medical care proves personal concern and deepens trust.
Probable long question. Comment on the significance of the title. Does it refer only to the abductee? Model answer. The title "The Captive" refers directly to Captain Batra, who is held hostage. But its meaning is wider. Batra is physically confined by guns, guards, locations, and political pressure. The young man, although an abductor, is also captive because he is bound by the organization, its ideology, his duty and responsibility for the hostage. Batra is also psychologically tied to the youth through trust, companionship, and shared fear. The gun symbolizes the relationship, with both men as prisoners at opposite ends of the barrel. Therefore, the title refers to the abductee, the abductor, and the invisible political and emotional bonds that limit both. Probable long question. Write about the journey undertaken by the captive and the young man. The journey begins with both men traveling by bicycle through unfamiliar highland terrain at dusk. They stop beside a clear stream and huge rock. The youth bathes while the captive reflects on the weapon, trust, and the kingfisher. They continue through a remote village, meet guards, and stay at the headman's house. The captive receives food, water, and respectful care, writes in his journal, and reflects on earlier fear. Because soldiers search the area, they change shelters and plan to reach a safe hill camp. The camp is destroyed, so they remain in the village. Soldiers surround the house at night. The youth lowers the gun instead of shooting Batra but is killed by security forces. Batra is rescued unharmed. Thus, the physical journey also becomes a journey of psychological understanding. In long answers, use sequence words: first, then, meanwhile, later, finally. Mention both the outward journey and inner change. Probable question. How does the story present human understanding beyond black and white politics? Model answer. The story does not ignore the violence or political conflict surrounding the captivity. It shows that the captive and the youth belong to opposing structures of power. However, through conversation, shared hardship, mutual learning, medical care, and trust, they recognize each other as human beings. The captive learns that the youth is educated, caring, and capable of independent thought. The youth listens to the captive and cares for him during illness. Captain Batra's reaction at the end is especially important. The operation calls the young man one terrorist, but Batra remembers him as a person whose company he shared. His cry, "Ah!" No, his touch on the forehead and his formal salute show that political labels cannot completely erase human dignity. The story therefore says that basic human values cannot always be evaluated in terms of politics and power.
All relationships cannot be defined through political structures. This is not a simple statement that every action is justified. It is a statement that people are more complex than the categories used to describe them. Answer writing tip: use the words human values, political label, invisible bond, individual experience, and moral complexity. Question: why does Batra mourn the youth? Because the youth had become a companion and had shown care despite the captivity. Question: what does the final salute signify? It acknowledges the young man's humanity and dignity even after he is politically labeled a terrorist. This is the central emotional effect of the ending.
अब पैसेज बेस्ड क्वेश्चंस प्रैक्टिस करते हैं. इफ द पैसेज कंटेन्स द लाइन देयर इज नो डेंजर हियर, identify the speaker as the youth and explain that the words spread calmness to the captive. If the passage contains free as a bird, explain the kingfisher image and the invisible bond that limits even apparent freedom. If the passage contains don't be afraid, explain that the phrase changes captivity from fear to trust. If the passage contains freedom fighters, explain the irony that they come to secure a captive's captivity. If the passage contains the enemy has surrounded us on all sides, explain that the night siege has begun and the youth is preparing for the final confrontation. If the passage contains so this is what death is like, explain that the captive expects execution but remains conscious because the youth did not fire. If the passage contains target safe, one terrorist killed, identify Captain Batra's RT-SET report and explain why the word terrorist shocks him. If the passage contains no, explain Batra's emotional rejection of a label that does not capture the youth's humanity. Passage answer method: first identify the speaker or situation, then explain the literal meaning, then connect it to the theme, and finally mention why the line matters. Do not write only a translation, add context. For example, "Don't be afraid" literally reassures the captive, but thematically, it marks the shift from command and suspicion to trust and cooperation. For "free as a bird," explain the paradox that the bird appears free but is bound by its need for the stream, just as the youth and captive are bound by their relationship. For the title, explain that both men are captive in different ways. HSCC एग्जाम में quoted words को exactly reproduce कीजिए. Use quotation marks around short phrases. Be careful with Captain Batra, the young man, the captive, and the youth. These are different narrative rules, but later the captive's identity is revealed as Captain Batra. Final objective revision. Who is the author? Hare Krishna Deka. What is the setting at the beginning? Near the highlands at almost dusk. What are they traveling by? Bicycles. Who takes a dip? The youth. Which bird does the captive think of? A kingfisher. What is the object in the bag? A weapon. Whose house shelters the captive? The village headman's house. What does the gun first symbolize? Terror and authority. What does it later symbolize? Trust and connection. What does the captive keep? A journal. How long has he kept the journal? About 3 months, while total captivity is 7 months. What changes the nature of the captivity? The arrival of the new youth and his words, "Don't be afraid." Who is Captain Batra? The captive, a government officer. What does RT-SET mean? Radio talkie. Who kills the youth? Security forces or soldiers during the rescue. What does the youth do with his gun? He lowers it instead of firing at the captive. Now, short answer revision. Why did the captive feel safe? Because the youth's feeling of safety spread to him and the gun became a sign of trust. Why did the captive return to the room when the door was open? Because he accepted the invisible trust and his own captivity. How did youth prove education? Through his pronunciation of English words, fluent Assamese, and independent decisions. Why did the youth treat the sick captive? He fetched a doctor, gave medicine, heated water, applied cold compresses, and cared for him. Why was the captive's death considered politically useful by the youth's organization? They believed it would prove that the government could not protect its citizens. Why is freedom fighters ironic? They come to secure the captivity of a person while claiming a struggle for freedom. Final central idea. The story portrays militancy and political conflict but focuses on human understanding. It shows that relationships, freedom, and captivity cannot always be measured in simple black and white terms.
Prepare long answers with introduction, ordered evidence, interpretation, and conclusion. Never omit the title, the gun, the journal, the youth scare, and the final salute.